Good morning. Happy Wednesday. How are you? We are reading chapter 3 of Who Was Thomas Jefferson? It was written by Dennis Brendel Frayden, illustrated by John O'Brien. When he married in 1772, Jefferson was in his third year in the House of Burgesses. Remember, those are lawmakers. Over the past few years, the 13 colonies had grown to become unhappy with British rule, the people from England telling them what to do. England had been trying to tax the colonists. We've learned about that, remember? The Americans said, nope, not going to do it. The Tea Act of 1773 made things worse. Remember, they said, England said, we're going to even tax your tea that you get from us. But people were very, very unhappy. You know this. A group of people in Boston, Massachusetts, said, this is not what we're going to do. No. So they got on 3 ships and they dumped chestfuls of tea into the water. That's called the Boston Tea Party. Great Britain was very unhappy at that. They closed the city's harbor. That's where the ships would come in and unload their stuff. It made it very difficult for people in Boston to obtain the supplies they needed. Look at this. This picture spans both pages. This is about the Boston Tea Party. It says, to protect the tax on tea, patriots, that means people are working towards our freedom, they disguised themselves as Native Americans, boarded 3 of the British ships, and dumped all the tea into the harbor. The British hoped the punishment would scare the Americans into obeying them. What do you think? Did that happen? Just the opposite happened. Many colonists, including Thomas Jefferson, were furious. They felt that the unjust British taxes just provoked the people from Boston. That means that they did it on purpose to make them mad. During this time of trouble, Patrick Henry made a famous speech. He said, give me liberty, freedom, give me liberty or give me death. It's like either you give me your freedom or I'll die. Unlike Patrick Henry, Jefferson didn't speak well in public. He often just sat there at meetings. But he was a writer. In 1774, he wrote a paper, and it was his first major writing on politics. It revealed that he was thinking of matters way beyond taxes. He said the colonists might be ready to separate from Britain. He even referred to the colonies as the States of America. Maybe that was the first time that it had ever been said. I'm not sure. And Jefferson had another suggestion. He said on June 1st, 1774, the day Boston's port was to close, the House of Burgesses, the lawmakers, should not do business as usual. Instead, they should pray and fast, that fast means not eat, to show support for Massachusetts. Jefferson's fellow lawmakers agreed. And Lord Dunmore, Virginia's British governor, learned of the plan. He decided to shut down the House of Burgesses in Williamsburg. Let me show you the pictures before I go on. This is Patrick Henry. And this is representing the paper that Jefferson wrote. Shutting down the House of Burgesses didn't stop Jefferson and his colleagues. They marched to a place of business where they could meet. There, they declared that Americans were one people and must stick together. They proposed that a meeting of delegates, people representing the colonies, would all meet. This big meeting was supposed to be held in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania in the fall of 1774. It was called the First Continental Congress. Every colony but Georgia sent delegates or people to represent their colony. Virginia's delegates included George Washington, heard of him before, and Patrick Henry. If Britain kept mistreating America after this, Congress was to meet again the next spring. There we go. There's George. This is a Pennsylvania State House. We'll learn about that in a minute. And this is them going to the meeting. Britain didn't change their ways. The war between the 13 colonies and Britain broke out in April 19th, actually, in 1775 at Lexington, Massachusetts. Remember, that's when they started shooting each other. The Second Continental Congress opened in Philadelphia, at a Pennsylvania State House in May. Jefferson wasn't there because he hadn't been chosen as a delegate, somebody to go. But when somebody else couldn't go, then he was able to go. Now, then he took his seat in the Congress. Now, he usually didn't say anything at all, but he could write like a champ. He was asked to write some of the Congress's official documents. So over the next year, the Congress couldn't decide what to do. Some delegates didn't want to cut all the ties with Britain. The war that had begun in Massachusetts would soon end, they hoped. Then America would return to British rule. Remember, not everybody wanted to have this country. Some people go, let's play nice. Let's be friends with Great Britain. They're great leaders. We'll just do what they want. But other people, the patriots, said, no, we want our own country. Other delegates, including Thomas Jefferson, wanted to create a new independent nation. Remember, independent means you do it yourself. As the war continued, more and more delegates favored independence. On June 7th, 1776, Richard Henry Lee of Virginia arose in Congress. That means he stood up. Declare America independent, he said. Congress was to vote on that very idea in early July, and a majority of the colonists, most of them, 7 out of 13, would have to favor independence for that to happen. And this is the battle between Lexington and Concord that happened in April. This is the Second Continental Congress, what we're talking about. What if the vote came out for independence? Then Congress would need to tell the world why America was separated from England. A committee was asked to prepare a Declaration of Independence. Its members were Ben Franklin, you've heard that name before, of Pennsylvania, John Adams actually, after George Washington became number 2 president, John Adams, Roger Sherman of Connecticut, Robert Livingston of New York, and Thomas Jefferson of Virginia. Instead of working as a group, they decided one of them should write the Declaration. Now, Franklin, very famous gentleman, even at that time, very famous. He had lots of interests. He was an inventor. He did this, he did that. He seemed like the man to be writing, but he was 70, getting on in years, and he was not a well man. So finally the choice became between Jefferson and Adams. Now, Jefferson, he had been away from the Congress for a little while because his mom had died. He had really bad headaches for weeks at a time. So he was not really in a writing mood when he was discussing who should write. And he was talking to John Adams. Jefferson said to John Adams, you ought to do it. Because Adams was older and more experienced, I guess. And Adams says, I'm not going to do it. Jefferson said, why? Reasons enough, said Adams. What could be your reasons? Thomas said. What is your excuse, I think is what he's saying. First, Adams said, a Massachusetts man shouldn't write the Declaration because that's where the Boston Tea Party happened. And the war's first battle also happened in Massachusetts. Now other colonies should get involved. Like we didn't want. Sounds like an excuse, but it ended up. Wait until you hear how it ended up. So, and then Adams said, more people like you, Thomas, than me. A declaration written by Jefferson would be better received than one by Adams. People would like it more. Reason 3, said John Adams, you can write 10 times better than I can. The praise for his writing did the trick. Well, said Thomas Jefferson, if you're decided, I will do the best I can. So he sat down in his second floor apartment and started writing. He set up a portable desk. And actually, that desk is in a museum in Washington, D.C. And guess what? Mrs. Frieda was very privileged in being able to see that desk. It's fascinating to me. Fascinating. He took out paper, pen, and ink. He started to write, when in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another. And the more he wrote, the more inspired, the more he wanted to write. In a few lines into the Declaration came these: we hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal. We've already heard that he had said that. He wrote that. Then he described how England was mistreated America. And then he finished with a moving sentence. And for the support of this declaration, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. And if the independence was voted down, if they didn't want it, it'd go in the trash. Only if independence passed would the paper be needed. When the vote was made on July 2nd, 12 colonies chose independence. New York didn't vote. However, several days later, New York made the vote unanimous. Unanimous means that everybody's voting for the same thing. The delegates thought that July 2nd, 1776, when independence was approved, would be considered the nation's birthday. They were wrong. Congress made some changes in the Declaration and then approved it on July 4th. Independence Day, the 4th of July. That's why we celebrate it. Excuse me. Copies of the Declaration went out to 13 new states. Americans loved the paper that proclaimed their country's birth. Since the document stated in Congress July 4th, 1776 on it, Americans began celebrating that date as the nation's birthday. The 4th of July is honored as the country's birthday to this day. Now, did writing the Declaration bring Jefferson instant fame or becoming famous? No. Congress wanted the Declaration to be an expression of the American mind, as Jefferson put it. No author was named on the document. Until 1784, when a paper mentioned it, few people knew that Thomas Jefferson had actually been the author, actually had written the document. And that's the end of chapter 3. Yesterday you learned about Sacagawea and how she became an interpreter and a guide. You learned that Lewis and Clark and the Corps of Discovery wintered not too far from the Mandan, a Native American tribe. They helped us find food, and in return, we helped them with tools. We helped their sick. Remember, the Hidatsa and the Mandan are different than some other tribes of Native Americans. The Hidatsa and the Mandan were farmers, and they had permanent earth lodge. They made buildings out of dirt and mud and so forth, and permanent, that means they were there. Now, today, our lesson is called Red Cedars and Grizzly Bears. Oh my goodness, I can't wait until you hear this, and I will see you tomorrow. Bye, I love you.